So, lads, there is a WNBA team that have been very, very, very much in, like, they made it clear that they want Caitlin Clark, or they're eventually going to want Caitlin Clark. Along those lines, they made it very, very clear.
Well, Stephanie, White thought. She had everything figured out with her. Superstar Caitlin Clark. But karma has a funny way of making coaches eat their words. Clark's dealing with yet another groin injury. And suddenly those cozy New York Liberty meetings don't look so innocent anymore. The writing's on the wall, folks.
Clark in the bowels of the Barclays Center with Liberty coach Sandy Brondello and Brianna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu. I'm just having a little fun.
Do you think Caitlin Clark is already mentally checking out of Indiana after seeing how Stephanie White has handled her injury situation? Let's be brutally honest here. Stephanie White's handling of Caitlin Clark has been about as smooth as sandpaper on silk. Clark has missed multiple games this season due to groin injuries, and White's response has been less than inspiring. When your franchise player is dealing with recurring injuries and you're acting like it's just another day at the office, you've got problems.
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of physicality that they're able to play with against her. I knew it as an opponent, and I see it as her coach. I'm not exactly sure why, but it just is what it is. And we've got to help her learn to adjust and use it against them in certain ways.
The pattern has been crystal clear from day one. There are signs that White and Clark aren't totally on the same page about Clark's role in the offense. White keeps trying to play Clark off the ball, despite Clark explicitly stating she's at her best when she has the ball in her hands, especially in transition. But does White listen? Of course not. She's too busy implementing her system to realize she's got a generational talent who needs the ball to be effective. Clark has missed 10 games this season due to injuries, including a previous left quad injury. 10 games? That's not just bad luck, that's a pattern. And what's White's reaction when asked about Clark's injury? Concerns? We went through semi-live shooting drills. She still hasn't gone full speed in a practice or live defensive group. Real reassuring there. Coach.
Did she have imaging today? Was it just see how she was feeling? I know you have a game tonight first, but is there any discussion yet about this weekend with her? Because obviously she's a huge part of All-Star.
No discussion yet about this weekend. There was imaging done, and obviously ruling her out for tonight, but there hasn't been any discussion beyond tonight.
The most telling part, Clark was ruled out for Wednesday night's game against the New York Liberty in Brooklyn after suffering a right groin injury in the final minute of Tuesday's 85-77 win over the Connecticut Sun. She was literally in tears on the bench, and White's response was basically a shrug. White told reporters after Tuesday's game that Clark felt a little something in her groin. A little something? Your star player is crying on the bench, and you call it a little something. The disconnect is absolutely staggering. Here's where it gets really interesting. The New York Liberty have been circling like sharks around Clark. And honestly, who can blame them? New York Liberty CEO Clark acknowledges that Clark has had an undeniable impact on recent business growth and came in and lit a fire. They see the value that White apparently doesn't fully appreciate. Remember when Clark scored a season-high 32 points and equaled a career-high 7 three-pointers on her return from injury as the Indiana Fever defeated the New York Liberty 1-0-88. That was Clark showing what she can do when she's healthy and in the right mindset. But what happened next? More injuries, more missed games, and more questionable coaching decisions from White.
We have just seen the New York Liberty players after the game meeting up with Caitlin Clark It is Stewie. It is Sabrina Ionescu. There is Sandy Brondolo. And by the way, Stewie is not leaving New York the rest of her career. That is one thing that I will be 99% sure of. That Stewie is not leaving. New York. Sabrina is not going to leave New York. I think there is a 50-50 chance Caitlin Clark leaves Indiana after her rookie season.
The Liberty connection isn't just speculation either. Clark selected New York Liberty guard Sabrina Ionescu, number 3 overall in the All-Star draft. That's not just a basketball decision. That's Clark showing respect for a player who's been in her shoes, dealing with similar pressure and expectations. The mutual respect between Clark and Liberty players is obvious, and it's something she's clearly not feeling with her current coaching staff. White's approach to Clark's playing time has been questionable at best. White said she likes the ability to have 2 primary ball handlers on the floor and specifically mentioned not wanting Clark to play under duress 94 feet the entire time she's on the floor. This is your franchise player we're talking about. The person who single-handedly elevated the entire WNBA's profile, and you're worried about her playing too much. The coaching philosophy clash is becoming more apparent by the day. Clark stated, "Plainly, I think we need to do a better job of getting me the ball in transition. Whether somebody is there or not, I think there's a fine balance of playing me off the ball and also getting the ball in my hands. That's when I'm the best in transition." That's not a request. That's Clark telling her coach exactly what she needs to succeed. And White's response, keep trying to make her play off the ball. The injury situation is becoming a real concern, and White's handling of it has been less than stellar. Clark has never had a lower field goal percentage or 3-point percentage in any 5-game span of her young WNBA career. When your star player is struggling, you adjust your system to help them. You don't just shrug and say you're not worried about their shot. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Clark's contract situation. She's in her 2nd year, which means she's got time to think about her future. The Liberty aren't just a well-run organization. They're a championship-caliber team that knows how to maximize talent. The Liberty recently sold a minority stake at a $450 million valuation, the richest valuation ever for a women's sports team. That's an organization that invests in winning. Compare that to the Fever's approach. The Fever went 5-5 this season without Clark, most recently falling to the Los Angeles Sparks 89-87. They're completely dependent on her. Yet, they can't seem to keep her healthy or use her effectively when she is healthy. That's not a sustainable model for success. The writing is on the wall when you look at how other teams view Clark versus how her own team treats her. Clark's return game against the Liberty averaged 2.22 million viewers, tying for the 2nd most watched game of the WNBA season. She's appointment television, yet her own coach treats her like she's just another player who needs to fit into the system. White's post-game comments after victories often feel like she's trying to downplay Clark's impact. After the Fever's dominant win over the Aces, White was more focused on the team's defensive performance than acknowledging Clark's leadership from the bench. Even when Clark is injured and cheering on her teammates, White can't give her proper credit.
You can see, and this is one of the more important things. You see this right here? You see this right here? This is Caitlin's agent. This is Caitlin Clark's agent.
The Liberty connection becomes even more interesting when you consider the coaching staff. As part of the All-Star game, Clark's team was set to be led by New York Liberty head coach Sandy Brondello. That's not just a coincidence, and that's Clark getting a taste of what coaching at the highest level looks like. Here's what really gets me. White's comments about Clark's return.
Timeline.
White shared that Clark still hasn't gone full speed in a practice or live defensive group despite working through rehabilitation phases. This is after Clark has already dealt with multiple injuries this season. A competent coaching staff would have figured out how to manage their star players'
Workload by now.
the most damning evidence of White's disconnect with Clark comes from the offensive philosophy. White said her biggest concern is when we reintegrate her, how do we continue to keep our ball movement and just getting the ball going, not just side to side, but baseline to baseline. Your biggest concern should be getting your best player back to 100% and letting her dominate, not figuring out how to make her fit into your system. The Liberty, meanwhile, understands star
Power.
They've got Brianna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu, and they've built their system around maximizing those talents. They don't try to make their stars fit into some predetermined mold. They adapt to get the best out of their players. Clark's frustration has been visible all
Season.
after suffering her latest groin injury. Clark was visibly emotional as she went to the fever bench and placed a towel over her head. That's not just physical pain. That's the frustration of a player who sees her career being mismanaged. The contrast between how Clark performs when healthy versus when she's dealing with injury issues is stark. When fully healthy, Clark had 14 points and 13 assists as the Fever scored a franchise record 64 points in the first half. But when she's dealing with nagging injuries and questionable coaching decisions, she struggles to find her rhythm. White's handling of Clark's all-star situation perfectly encapsulates the problem. When asked about Clark's participation in all-star festivities, White said, "Caitlin and her team will make decisions when it comes to all-star. For me, it's a big deal for us to have all-star in Indianapolis. And of course, with Caitlin being a focal point of all of
That.
she's basically passing the buck instead of taking responsibility for her players' health." The Liberty's approach to veteran leadership and player development is night and day compared to the Fevers. They've got a proven track record of maximizing talent and winning championships. The Fever, they're still trying to figure out how to use the most talented player in the league. What makes this situation even more infuriating is White's apparent inability to read the room. When you have a player of Clark's caliber dealing with injury issues, you don't make statements about ball movement and system integration. You focus on getting her healthy and building around her strengths. The fact that White keeps talking about fitting Clark into her system instead of adapting the system to Clark's strengths shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what she has. The injuries aren't just physical setbacks, they're mental ones too. Clark came into the league with an iron will and unshakable confidence. But when you're constantly dealing with physical issues and coaching staff that doesn't seem to fully grasp your value, that confidence can erode. The emotional reaction we saw after her latest injury wasn't just about the physical pain.
It
Was about the frustration of feeling like her career is being mismanaged. Let's address the elephant in the room: the reported conversations between Clark, her agent, and Liberty players. When agents start having conversations with other organizations, that's not just friendly networking. That's business. Clark's agent wouldn't waste time on meaningless conversations, especially when their client is dealing with ongoing issues with their current team. The timing of these conversations is particularly telling. They're happening while Clark is dealing with Injury issues and coaching philosophy. Clashes. That's not a coincidence. That's Clark's camp exploring their options because they're not satisfied with the current situation in Indiana. White's public comments about Clark's injuries have been consistently tone-deaf, calling a groin injury that leaves your star player in tears a little something is the kind of statement that makes players question whether their coach truly understands or
Cares about their well-being.
it's the kind of statement that makes agents start making phone calls to other organizations. The contrast between how the Liberty organization operates and how the Fever operate is stark. The Liberty understand that championship organizations are built around maximizing their star players' strengths. They don't try to